My name is Judith Kimbrell, and welcome to my presentation on photographing Garden of the Gods. I'm just going to talk a little bit about my favorite locations in the park, and maybe a couple of tidbits that you might or might not know, historical facts and whatnot. So thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome. Just a little bit about me. I've lived in Colorado Springs for most of my life, 30 years-ish. I lived here when I was a child, and then we moved away, and I moved back and have been here ever since, and now have a husband and 3 children in this town. I went to Hillsdale College and had a double major of art and theater, and then went to Western Michigan University and studied a little bit more in photography. I've worked for ad agencies. I've been an assistant. I taught for 12 years and was the chair of the professional photography program at Pikes Peak Community College. That's a local college. I've been in many galleries and art festivals and done all of those circuits. So my biggest project to date has been the 15 by 20 foot wall mural downtown Colorado Springs on Kiowa and Tejon Street. And that was very fun with the Palmer Land Trust project. They called it Forever Yours the Land. My first book was Garden of the Gods Capturing Colorado series, which you'll see on your left. And then I brought out a children's book, Garden of the Gods A to Z. And that talks a little bit about Colorado Springs, Garden of the Gods, the founders, local geology, and that's good for kids, pretty much any child who wants to look at pictures from when they're born to through probably lower middle school for information. And then I have Taking Your Shot, which right now is in an online version. You can get it on my website. You can get it on books through Apple, and there'll be hopefully a print version coming out within this next year. And that's for people who are interested in photography and don't know how to start a career in photography. So not so much a how-to book, but a basic career guide. And my books are sold at many, many places around town. So the most often photographed locations in Garden of the Gods. There are some I love to photograph. I go back there all the time because every day it's going to be a little bit different. And the first one is Garden of the Gods Gateway. This, if you look at the picture, you'll see 2 orange rocks, and on the left is the South Gateway Rock, and on the right is the North Gateway Rock with Pikes Peak right there in the middle. And you have this wonderful tree framing the shot. And this is one of my first images I did of Garden of the Gods that I love, and it happens to be my top seller. This location is currently off limits because the honey ant lives there. When I took the photograph, it was not off limits, but it is now. But there used to be a trail going up to that spot. This is actually the same morning photographed with a different lens and 5 minutes apart from the other one. This one was actually first, and the one I showed you was second. And you can see kissing camels up to the top right of the image with, again, Pikes Peak in the middle there. And there's sort of a funny story associated with this. The top selling shot I used on my Garden of the Gods book, and I put out a press release, and I was contacted by a local park ranger, and he asked me, so how do you feel about your first shot in the book being of a location that's off limits to tourists? And I thought, oh no, I'm in so much trouble. But no, I told him that I photographed it, 15 years before at least. And he said, oh no, at that point, I don't think it was off limits. He wasn't even around then, so it was probably just fine. But now, yes, it is off limits. This is another great location. This shows Pikes Peak and the garden from the road, essentially. And there's what used to be called White House Ranch, which is now called Rockledge Ranch, is right in the foreground of the shot. And I love this location. First morning light is when you'll get this. This, of course, was done in winter. It is becoming a tougher location to photograph because now off to the right side, they're creating more parking lots for tourists, which is a blessing to have tourists, but at the same time, it sort of ruins that morning shot, unfortunately, of Garden of the Gods. But again, one of my favorite locations. And then this shows all of Garden of the Gods, and this is up by Mesa Overlook. And so it's up the hill from Garden of the Gods, and there's a pull-off here with a parking lot. And this was with a very wide angle lens. So you get a whole mountain range, Garden of the Gods, Pikes Peak, and then this nice bowl effect that's created with the snow underneath. So this was done right around Christmas time. If you go into the park and you drive around the main rocks to the back side, I call it the west face because it faces west. You have this wonderful shot of the line of rocks, and they're sort of cascading down, and then back into the bottom right corner there you see a mountain, and that is Cheyenne Mountain in the distance. This is a day with white puffy clouds, which we don't get a lot in Colorado Springs. Just not one of the things we do. These are more shots on the west side of the two rocks. The top one is the North and South Gateway rocks. And then on the bottom, we again have more versions of that. The bottom left has yucca in it. And I was just right before the yucca bloomed. And I've been waiting for years to retake this shot with the yucca blooming. Every time I get there, you have maybe a window of a day, and maybe it doesn't bloom at all that year. So this has been on my list to try again, but it hasn't worked out for me so far. But I try every year. And this is again from that same location. This was done while I was doing a tour for somebody else, and I was taking them around Garden of the Gods and allowing them to take photos as well. That was part of the tour. And the light came across the garden, and the person I was with didn't think the light was very good. They thought the light was very flat, and they said so, that this isn't any good. And I was looking at the light thinking, this is beautiful. I don't know what you're talking about. But the way it just rolls down off the mountain and onto the rocks, you have that last glow of the daylight. And then you have this beautiful gradation happening as the light sort of falls off the rocks. And I love that about this shot. This is Balanced Rock. It's one of the most, maybe the most photographed location in the park. And you have this rock that is balanced on top. Now they've cemented the bottom in just to be sure that it's not going to fall on anybody, but it's been balanced for a long time. And I took this image on the left with sunflowers. That's one of my top selling shots. And just for the vibrancy. And that's the front face of it. And then you have the back face is in the right side photo. So the balanced rock looks very different from whether you're looking at it from the west or the east. This is another shot of it in winter. And then of course we have kissing camels. Kissing camels, I love the kissing camels. It's one of my favorite formations in the park. I've always thought it's a little romantic. And in the nighttime, they have a spotlight on there now so that you can see it pretty much all day long. And again, some of these were photographed years and years before, where the park was a little bit more open in terms of hiking trails. So some of these locations are also a little bit out of bounds these days, but this tree provided a great opportunity to just frame the kissing camels. The Siamese Twins is another one of my favorites. This shot you see all the time. This is the window in the Siamese Twins. And if we go to the next shot, you can see the Siamese Twins. They look like two separate rocks, but they're connected, like they're holding hands and their arms are together. So that's why it's called the Siamese Twins formation. And every tourist, of course, that goes up to Siamese Twins takes their picture by sitting themselves in the window, and then you can see the peak behind them, Pikes Peak. And these are just various views from that same location. If you walk around, there are all kinds of different and spectacular images that you can take in all seasons of year. Cathedral Spires. Again, I love this rock formation, and it's, I think, a very beautiful thing. If you look off to the left side of the rocks, you can see that there are two rocks. Let's see if I can get my pointer here, right here. These two. They are completely balanced, and someday they're going to fall down, and they have big signs everywhere that says, be here at your own risk, because someday when those rocks go, it's going to be a little bit dangerous. But I love that location. I was doing another photo tour at this location once, and there was for a young man and young lady, probably in their early 20s, and he asked me to videotape for him because he wanted to propose to to what would be then his fiance, and of course she said yes. So that was right there in the garden, and it was a spontaneous moment for me, and really one of my best memories of the park. right next to Cathedral Spires, which, by the way, Cathedral Spires is also called Centennial Rock to some people. There are some rocks that have had multiple names over the years. This formation is called the Three Graces, and it's right in that very same area, just a few feet away. This formation is named for the Greek Graces, or Charities, and I have their names right there, and I think that's another beautiful spot. Unusual weather in the park makes some of the best photographs. Most people will go out in the middle of the day to view Garden of the Gods and walk around and take their photos. But really, the best photographs happen either at first or last light in the day, and you have maybe that good golden 5 minutes where you can take a beautiful photo, or they happen on days where it's not so beautiful and the weather turns. This is an example from, in 1999, we had a flood, a massive flood, where we had days and days of rain, which is very unusual for Colorado Springs. And this was in the springtime. And after it rained, there became this pool of water in Garden of the Gods. And there used to be, right in this depression, there used to be a pond. And it used to be part of the water system for General Palmer, who is our founder. So if you talk to old timers in Colorado Springs, some people still remember that there used to be water in that area all the time, and they'll tell you how they used to picnic on Sundays and enjoy doing that right at that pond. But yes, currently, if you went there today, you won't see any water there at all. So after the flood, everybody and their brother who had a camera went out and photographed the rocks. But unfortunately, a lot of them did it before the trees started to bloom. So a lot of the photos you see just have barren trees and brown grass, and that's about it. So I actually waited several weeks to go out and photograph this. I would check on it every couple of days, see if the water was still there, see how the trees were blooming, if it was ready yet to photograph. And by the time I got there, standing water for a long time creates a certain odor that's not so good, but the photograph itself is beautiful, and of course you have the rocks reflected in the water and this little tree here that's just starting to bloom. And then general rainstorms can provide great and very dramatic opportunities in the garden as well. So this is just a beautiful rainstorm where it was actually reflecting all of this light back into the landscape, and I thought that was really lovely. And then if you get lucky enough to see a rainbow, I'm always on the hunt for more rainbow shots in Garden of the Gods. And the key is this: when it starts to rain and all the tourists start exiting the park, you are driving into the park. You have your equipment packed and ready to go, and you're on your way in. And while it's raining and maybe hailing down on you, you're parked in the parking lot on the west side here of the rocks, and you are waiting until that storm passes, because that rainbow window is maybe 5 to 10 minutes. So you have to be prepared to jump out at any moment and capture that photo. So again, this is just a dramatic photo that almost it kind of felt like a beach scene to me. I like that about it. And of course, snow. We do get snow in Colorado, and sometimes we get quite a lot of it. This day was just a dusting, but I thought it made for a nice photo. But there are times when we get dumped on, certainly, and you can take advantage of that. I have found, though, that the best photographs that people like to buy are going to be those that have snow, but it's the morning after when the sky is blue, but the snow is on the ground. And then in Colorado, we also have times where we have natural disasters, unfortunately. And though it is certainly a tragedy when that happens, because we lose structures and lives sometimes even, it photographically provides a lot of really beautiful opportunities. So this fire was called the Waldo Canyon Fire in 2012, and this was our most devastating fire, I believe. We also had one in Black Forest not too long after that, I think a year after that, which was also horrific and impacted so many people. The Waldo Canyon Fire, the light was so unbelievably beautiful, but it was so smoky, which is why the light was so wonderful. I was actually outside wearing a respirator and taking this photograph. And this is before the fire crested the mountain. For a while we thought it was going to come down into Garden of the Gods, and that luckily did not happen, but we got real close. And unfortunately it did go down the mountain, but in the opposite direction and into a neighborhood, and just devastated many people's homes. In fact, I know some people that were impacted personally. So that was an epic tragedy. But photographically, it was an opportunity, unfortunately, and it provided some beautiful light and some outstanding images, some of which I thought were some of the most impactful images I've ever done. So again, the top images is from the Waldo Canyon fire right before it came down the mountain. I think the next day it came down the mountain. And then there was a fire called the Hayman Fire in 2002, which did not devastate Colorado Springs at all. It was off over the mountain pass a little bit, but also provided a lot of smoke and some very warm light. So the two images on the bottom were taken the same day from about the same location during that fire. And also this one was the 2002 fire as well. Detail shots. I love detail shots, and sometimes you just have to stop and look around you. Sometimes they're just on the floor. You just turn your camera down and boom, there it was for me. And in Garden of the Gods, you have a lot of rock details, all kinds of different textures, different types of rock, different shelves and holes, and all kinds of things that provide for excellent detail shots. And wonderful in color, obviously, because the rocks can be so colorful, but also great in black and white, which leads us to black and white. Some of my images are shown in black and white and color. They're almost all shot in color, but some just lean toward black and white. I prefer them that way. So this is an example of that. Even though sunflowers are yellow, and I do sell it in color for people who wish that, I like it better in black and white with that natural sunburst. I don't use any filters. That was just sunbursting through the clouds at that moment. Oh, and you can see Garden of the Gods over in the distance. And again, the fields, which these days is a tough shot, since again, now they have these new parking lots in front of Garden of the Gods. So these shots are going to be few and far between, I think, from now on. This one, again, I like it in black and white. There is a color version. It has a blue and a pink sky, which is nice, but I just like the drama of that with the pine tree framing the Pikes Peak. And more images I just prefer. Sometimes it's all about shape, like on the one on the left, that silhouette was so dramatic because of the light happening behind it, and so that really leads itself to be used better in black and white. Again, that's another west face version. This is actually shot in the morning, which is why the light is coming from behind the rocks as opposed to the afternoon, which is when I usually photograph this location. That sunflower shot was done on the same day, and the shot on the left was just a cloudy day toward winter. And you often get some dramatic clouds, especially with the storms in Garden of the Gods. And the one on the left, I love these kinds of images because you look up and you think, how is that tree growing there? You know, nature has a will of its own, and it wants to thrive, and it wants to grow and propagate itself. So it always sometimes astounds me when it finds the smallest little patch of dirt and still grows a tree on the top of a rock where it shouldn't be there. So, fun facts that you may or may not know, some things that I learned doing my research. Balanced rock was once owned by a photographer, and apparently you had to, if you wanted to go up to the rock, you had to agree to get your picture taken and pay for the picture, and that was part of the deal. And Steamboat Rock also was privately owned. And since then, the city has bought them. The park was donated by the family of Charles Perkins. He was a friend of General Palmer when they worked with the railroads together. And he always wanted the garden to go to the public and to the city after he died. He did not write that in his will, But his family honored his wishes, which is wonderful. Instead of making millions and billions of dollars by selling land and building gigantic mansions and private homes, they did donate it to the city. The key was that the park always had to be free to the public, and they couldn't charge to go into the park. So North Gateway Rock, I found out is hollow. That was really interesting. I had no idea. There is an entrance on the west side of it, which has now been sealed up because they're worried about cave-ins. That's a big problem. But apparently it is hollow with a very long space. I think it's 15 feet by 200 feet long, and it's called Spalding's Cage because a trapper named Spalding found the cave long ago. He wasn't the first to find it. It's been a place for people to get in and out of the rain for a long time, but he's credited with that. There are signatures on the walls of many, many people over the years, and one of those is William Henry Jackson, which he's a very famous landscape photographer. So many rocks, like I said, have multiple names. They've changed over time. So if you're looking up a particular rock and you see it labeled differently, there's a reason for that. I learned all about the American Indian tribes and all the indigenous people that had wandered Garden of the Gods prior to the European descendants of settlers. All kinds of tribes. The Ute, Kiowa, Pawnee, Apache, Arapaho, Cheyenne, Comanche, lots of different people. They used Garden of the Gods as hunting grounds. They used it as a meeting place. It was not a sacred space to them per se, but they did use the land as well. And there are a few petroglyphs in the park. Petroglyphs are carved onto rock as opposed to petrographs, which are drawn or painted on. So we have a couple of rock carvings in the park, but they are top secret. I tried to find out where they were, not to spread the information, but just so I could photograph them. I told the park manager I was even willing to sign away my life legally just to be able to photograph one. But he said that one, they were mostly faded by now, and two, they're kept in very secret locations. So I have a good idea where one is, and someday I might try to go sort that out on my own, secretly myself, of course. But yes, it's top secret. And over 2 million tourists visit the park every year. That is a lot of people that come to Garden of the Gods. And it's a huge benefit for those of us like myself who sell books at the visitor center and the trading post. That's a wonderful thing to be able to sell more books. But it is also a lot of people. So the park has issues that they're dealing with in terms of parking, hence the new parking lots, and just getting enough people in and out of the park safely during the day, making sure it's maintained, picking up trash and litter and all of those things that go along with tourists that want to enjoy the park, which we love because everybody should have an opportunity to enjoy the park. But we also just have to take care of it while we're there. So that's a challenge. But it's something that apparently they sort out every year. So thank you for joining me in my presentation about Garden of the Gods. I hope you learned at least one thing that you didn't know before. You're welcome to look on my website at mothernaturephotography.com, and you can browse images. They're sorted into categories. I have books. I have a line of cards and bookmarks as well, and lots of educational materials, some videos, and some information for folks who just want some photography tips as well on my blog. So thank you for joining me and have a nice day.